The third goal as a mould testing technician is to identify pathways by which fungal particulate or biotoxins can spread through the built environment. This is important because this enables you to establish your sampling plan in order to determine how far to sample. For example, if you find that biotoxins are going through exhaust fans, etc., you might want to sample the roof cavity. If you've got an actual growth in one room, you will want to sample the adjacent rooms to see if that type of fungi you found in the affected room is spread to the other rooms and how it's diluted as it's gone through. Remember, when it comes to sampling, that you can take many more samples than what the client can afford and then get the lab to hold it. So when they actually analyse the most important samples, if they are high, then you can convince the client, actually I took more samples, so now that they are high, can you please pay for these extra samples to be analysed by the lab, which are at the lab, in order to determine how far that fungal particulate has spread so we can establish a scope of works. So don't forget, you can take a lot more samples than what the client's prepared to pay. The lab can hold it for up to 4 to 8 weeks, and then you can give them permission or not to analyse them if the client's willing to pay for them. Pathways, there are many pathways in a house by which fungi can spread, and you've got to think, if you've got high levels of moisture in one area where there's potential growth, then it's going to be sporulating and germinating those spores and hyphae. So I've mentioned lift pits is a big problem in multi-storey apartments. If you're examining an apartment on the 3rd floor, you must look at the ground floor because, of course, the lift could be a common pathway by which it could spread. You want to get the building manager to be with you at the time to show you the lift pit and to describe any drainage issues that they've had on that multi-storey complex, because it could be affecting the client's apartment. The other one is stairwells. Hot air rises, so when you have problems in basements and there's a stairwell to the next floor, that can act as a pathway to get to the next floor. So if you've got a problem with the basement that has visible mould, etc., you sample. You always want to sample the next floor in order to see if there's actually a dilution or presence of the same type of fungi as what you found in the basement. Exhaust fans and vents are common ways by which fungi can spread throughout the house, and of course bathrooms are so common because of their failing waterproof membranes and inadequate ventilation that it can result in fungal particulate getting into the roof void where it can then spread to other parts of the house. So that's an issue you need to think about. Chimneys, of course, can be also another way. Electrical outlets can also be a problem insofar as if it's in the hidden in the walls, they could be coming out through the outlets, the fungal particulate. Or, you know, sometimes in older buildings and terrace homes, you'll find that the wooden floorboards have gaps, and if there's rising damp underneath, it could be coming up through the boards themselves, through the gaps. Recessed lights, water damaged mattresses and furnishings. Very important in the interview with the client and the questionnaire that you ask. Have you ever been in a mouldy or water damaged environment before? Have you ever had any furnishings in this house that were in a water damaged environment? More often than not, clients can contaminate an entire house by bringing their soft furnishings that were in a water damaged home into the next house and contaminate that apartment or house. So that is a big problem, and many clients with CIRS, chronic inflammatory response, will get very sick when they sit down on the couch. All that fungal particulate comes up, they breathe it in, goes through their eyes and their nose and mouth, and they can get quite sick for hours or days at a time, and that could be the main source. It may not be the built structure that's the problem. It could actually be a furnishing, a mattress, a pillow, or something like that. So you've got to be quite vigilant in looking for this and asking the right questions. So that's really important. Antique furnishings, I'm really anti because of the lead paint, but of course, again, any soft furnishings that you don't know the history of are potentially problematic. Heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems. So refrigerative air conditioners, these ones like the split systems that often heat and cool, used in hot, humid climates. They're very effective at cooling. However, they are expensive to run, and they are a common source of fungal particulate and problems in homes. Often because, firstly, people don't service them regularly enough. They should never have any sign of dirt on them. Remember, fungi can't grow on plastic, but it will grow on the dirt sitting in the surfaces. So this is why, for that reason alone, they should be regularly serviced. Secondly, if they're not sized appropriately for the room, they may not be cycling appropriately, which means they can condense, causing moisture droplets in the unit. And then, of course, fungi can use that as a source of moisture and then spreading fungi throughout the rest of the house. In many homes, this is the major source of mold in the house. So you always, with a torch, open this up, lift this top bit up here, obviously on a step ladder. Have a look through the blades. Down here you'll see is underneath is where the barrel fan is, behind the condensing coil. Always search with your torch. And of course, if there's any sign of visible mold or dirt, you want to do at least a biotape surface sample ideally. So this is really important. If you don't test this and there's dirt in it, you're not doing your job. Evaporative coolers, like what we have in Melbourne where it's quite dry, we have these evaporative coolers or swamps, and they sit on the roof and they pull humid air, which sounds ridiculous, into the house, but it's fresh air. Now, because Melbourne, it can be so dry, like 35% relative humidity, it's actually not such a problem. You're pushing humid air, but if the humid air is sustained for more than 48 hours, then of course it can be problematic. The problem with this is a lot of people don't know how to use them properly. When you're using a evaporative cooler like this, you must have at least a window or a door slightly ajar in order to enable that humid air to move through. If they close all the windows and doors, they end up with condensation. I had a recent job in Perth where she had this system and she kept all the windows and doors closed, and this resulted in moisture on the surfaces. When we did surface samples, they were in the tens of thousands per square inch per centimetre square. High levels, the whole place was completely contaminated. It was a $30,000 job because she didn't keep the windows and the doors slightly ajar when she has the evaporative cooler on. They need to be serviced and they need to be cleaned. So I know there are some that are self-cleaning, which is good. The problem with mine, I've got a relatively new one, but occasionally it does a periodic clean and dumps so much water into the roof, onto the roof tiles and the gutters, that it actually gets back into the eave because it can't cope. So that can be a problem. That's where a plumber needs to make sure it's plumbed outward when it's doing those intermittent dumping of water. Vacuum cleaner is something you've got to think about. I always ask the client, who cleans your house? What vacuum cleaner do they use? Do they use yours or do they use theirs? Because the cleaner is going to potentially be cleaning one house to the other, and they're going to be likely to be water damaged. So they're spreading fungal particulate from one house to your house. And you definitely don't want to be doing that. So with the evaporative cooler, you want to make sure that it's vacuum cleaner, that it's yours. It's fitted with a HEPA filter to filter out all that fungal particulate, and also a motorised head to dig into the pile of that carpet. So don't ever get a professional cleaner to use their vacuum cleaners because they could be spreading it from one house to the other. A recent audit I did in Queensland was a vacuum cleaner. At the end of the interview, exposure history interview with the client, I always get them to show me their vacuum cleaner. He pulled out the vacuum cleaner, it was covered in visible mould. And I said, well, where do you store this? And he said, under the stairs. And when we looked under the stairs, there's a huge damp, musty odour, high levels of visible mould present under the stairs where there was a moisture issue of rising damp from it was butting up into the soil. And as soon as he gets the vacuum cleaner out, and he just spreads all this fungal particulate throughout the house, and he has chronic fatigue syndrome and he's sick for days and never noticed that it happened when he vacuumed. So, it's really important that you get the vacuum out. I pull it apart and just get the HEPA filter out, the motorised head, and I explain it to the client that they have to replace the HEPA filter at least every 6 months or more if they've got allergies. But we'll go more into that in the air pollution and air sampling subject for those who are doing building biology. So that's the third goal.